These are found in what we share together and in the comfort that we give one another and in the memories that will sustain us. So I'm going to, if I may lead the two of you through this blessing. We'll do it in Hebrew and then in English, and then I'll ask you to put a small tear at the bottom of the rhythm. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet, which means in English, blessed are you, wise one, our God, sovereign of all worlds, source of truth. And say, Amen. And put a small tear right at the bottom of that last. If I come over here, will this work for people if I speak from, I don't want people to...
The microphone will be on.
Oh, okay. I'd like to begin with a reading from Albert Einstein. Strange is our situation here upon earth. Each of us comes for a short visit, not knowing why, yet sometimes seeming to divine a purpose. From the standpoint of daily life, however, there is one thing we do know: that we are here for the sake of each other. Above all, for those upon whose smile and well-being our own happiness depends. And also for the countless unknown souls with whose fate we are connected by a bond of sympathy. Many times a day, I realize how much my outer and inner life is built upon the labors of others, both living and dead, and how earnestly I must exert myself in order to give in return as much as I have received and am still receiving. We have come together this morning to celebrate the life and to mourn the loss of Connie Gordon. May her memory be for a blessing. Even as we grapple with the pain of her physical absence, we recall the gift of her presence in our lives. We are thankful for all that was good and true in the way that she lived, and for the precious memories that will endure among all those who knew and loved her. It is a daunting and ultimately impossible task to attempt to capture the depth and complexity of a human soul using the tools of the written or spoken word. And yet we are driven by our human need for meaning and continuity to make the attempt nonetheless. So let us acknowledge that today is the merest beginning of the process of distilling the legacy that Connie leaves to us, a process that will continue over the coming weeks and months, and for many of us, last far into the future. The biblical book of Genesis says of the patriarch Abraham, just after describing the moment of his death, that he lived to a good ripe age, old and contented, and he was gathered to his kin. These are words that any human being would hope to be spoken at the end of their life, and they are certainly appropriate this morning as we gather to honor the life of Connie Gordon. Connie was an only child, and she had a particularly close relationship with her father, who unfortunately was killed in a car accident while Connie was still quite a young woman, just before the birth of her middle daughter, Terry. This was the first of several tragic losses she would have to endure and transcend over the course of her life. Just a couple of years earlier, Connie had fallen in love with and married Lou Fetterman. They were happily married for nearly 3 decades before the severe heart disease that he'd been contending with for a number of years finally robbed him of his life and left Connie and their 3 young adult daughters bereft of his loving and joyful presence. Perhaps in part as a result of Connie being an only child, social connections beyond her family were always very important to her. She sought out and was embraced by many circles of friends throughout her life, and she invariably inspired affection in all those with whom she came into contact, whether in a casual or a more structured way. Connie's long and fruitful life brimmed over with creative energy and a joie de vivre across a number of different dimensions, including painting, travel, cooking, dancing, and spending time with those she cared about. Connie always had an eye for beauty in the world, whether the source was the realm of nature or generated by the human hand and heart. She loved discovering a beautiful painting, and she could always identify just the right place to hang it in her home. In her later years as a resident of the Breckenridge Village, she served as the chair of the residents' art committee and thoroughly enjoyed the role of leading the group that got to decide about which new works of art should be brought into the facility and how they should be displayed. But Connie was not only an appreciator of art, she was a talented artist in her own right. Painting was one of her favorite activities, and she kept at it late into her 90s, adorning her living space with these colorful products of her imagination. Connie never attended college, much to the chagrin of her adoring father, but her well-honed set of communication skills, along with her personal charm and her steady commitment to a high quality of work, led her to a lifetime of interesting and successful work experiences. One of her earliest jobs was during the Second World War in Macon, Georgia, where she worked as a secretary for a high-level government office and had to be sworn to secrecy due to the sensitive and classified nature of the content that she was transcribing. At a time when most married young women were focused on their domestic roles and responsibilities, Connie was a bit of an outlier in deciding that she wanted to learn how to be a travel agent. She started out working for one of her cousins who ran a small agency where Connie received a salary that left a little to be desired. But soon she had developed her understanding and skills to a level where she was able to qualify for positions in much larger and more lucrative settings, and she did not hesitate to pursue those opportunities. She became very successful in this field and took full advantage of the perks it provided by arranging for many long-distance trips to places such as Israel and Egypt and other locations in Western Europe and around the Mediterranean, as well as signing up for cruises, which she got to enjoy first with her husband Lou and later on after she had remarried with her husband in later life, Earl. Connie brought her creativity and sense of beauty into the culinary dimension of her life as well. She was a great cook and an enthusiastic fan of well-made and well-presented food, an attribute that she passed down to many of her descendants. She also had an impressive sweet tooth. Sarah recalled how much her grandmother loved chocolate and how they would often indulge in fudgesicles when Sarah would visit Connie's condo in Beechwood. And Howard recalled the important role food played in his bonding process with Joanne's family when they were first dating, as Connie welcomed him with her signature mocha and lemon meringue pies, which pretty much sealed the deal. The fact that he and Connie shared a profound dislike of raisins provided the proverbial icing on the cake. Even in the very last stages of her life, Connie never lost her appreciation for a tasty treat. In the days before she came down with the illness that would claim her life, her daughter Kathy brought her lunch from the Ritz Hotel, and Connie proceeded to eat it with great gusto. And not long after that, when she was already in hospice, Connie convinced the social worker to bring her a hot fudge sundae, despite the fact that hospice residents were not supposed to get that kind of special treatment. As the entire family recognized, Connie knew what she liked, and more often than not, she found a way to get it. Another aspect of beauty and creativity that was important to Connie was connected to personal appearance. Throughout her long life, her own physical beauty was appreciated by those around her, and she worked pretty seriously at maintaining it. She had two favorite wigs that she playfully named Kayla and Constance. And for most of her adulthood, she would go to the hairdresser at least every couple of weeks. But when she reached her late 90s, she felt it would be okay to reduce the frequency of these visits to merely monthly. Although her appreciation for beauty was a well-known part of her life within her family, there was one particular expression of it that did not become as obvious until her later years. This had to do with her interest in the beauty of the natural world. Howard remembers being struck by how often Connie would comment on the colors of the trees as he drove her to and from the Breckenridge facility so she could join them for Sunday dinner. And Joanne had similar memories for bringing Connie out to the Nature Center in North Chagrin Reservation as she fielded unanticipated questions from Connie about bird and tree species generated by the surroundings. Terry and Tom both pointed out how Connie's creativity and competence were clearly passed down to her children and grandchildren, sometimes in more obvious ways, such as choosing to become a visual artist or a professor of literature, and sometimes in less obvious but no less significant ways, such as in bringing a creative sensibility to the administration of a nonprofit organization or to the challenges of a career as a trial attorney. Connie was a true matriarch of her family, with a deeply romantic attitude toward the world that she maintained down to her final days. Even as she began to experience the loss of some cognitive acuity, she stayed connected to everyone in her circle and continued to model the ancient adage of carpe diem, seizing the day through her clear enjoyment of opportunities, large and small, to celebrate life. She relished being the focus of attention at her recent 100th birthday celebration and was captured on video as she enthusiastically joined in dancing with Joanne and her young great-granddaughter, Eleanor, showing off the moves she still had even at such an advanced age. Like Abraham of old, there is no doubt that Connie lived a life that can be described as good, ripe, and contented, and there is similarly no doubt that her memory will continue to be for a blessing. Zichrona livracha. At this time, I would like to invite, if anyone wants to share a few words, you are welcome to come up and do so before we proceed with the next part of the burial ceremony. And no pressure. So, the next part of the ceremony involves the chanting of Malay Rakhami. Now, do people want to stay seated for this? I guess we won't move over to the grave proper until after this. I'll invite people to, if they want to help fill in the grave. So we'll do Malay Rakhami, and if you are comfortable doing so, and only if you're comfortable, I'll invite you to stand for this, but if you are not comfortable doing so, please remain seated. Malay Rakhami Shochen Bamromin Hamtsei Minucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'malot Kedoshim Utehorim Kezohar Harakia Masihirim Et Nishmat Kelamina Bat Herev Efren Shalcha Leolama Ana Baal Harachamim Hastireha Beseter Kenafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror Achayim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen. In English, that means divine source of mercy, dwelling in the depths of our hearts, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekhinah, your divine presence, amid the ranks of the holy and the pure, illuminating like the brilliance of the skies the soul of Connie Gordon, who has gone to her eternal place of rest. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter her beneath your wings eternally and bind her soul among the living, that she may rest in peace. And together let us say, Amen. So, in a moment, we're going to, for those who are comfortable doing so, I'm going to invite you to proceed a little bit up the hill towards the grave, and we're going to invite people to help bury the coffin. There's a special name for this ritual in Jewish tradition. It's called Chesed Shel Emet in Hebrew, which can be translated in a couple of different ways. One is true kindness, and it's true kindness because you know when you help to bury a loved one, there's no way you'll ever be paid back for this. It's only something that you're doing because of the love for that person. It also can be translated as kindness in the face of truth, kindness in the face of mortality. And so one of the ways that we handle that significant human challenge is by coming together and helping to bury our loved ones. So there is a pile of earth next to the grave, and there is a shovel, and I would invite first immediate family members, if you would like to put a shovel full of earth into the grave, and then anyone else, any other people who are here, any other family who would like to do so are invited to do so as well. if people want to return to the seated area here. The final part of today's ceremony will be the recitation for the first time of Mourner's Kaddish. And while it's, again, traditional for first-degree relatives to recite, I would invite anyone who feels moved to do so to join in its recitation. I just want to underscore, perhaps surprisingly, that the Mourner's Kaddish says absolutely nothing about death, but rather affirms the life force of the universe. It reminds us that the cycle of life and death is never ending, that it is a mystery and out of our hands. In Jewish tradition, often at happy occasions, we do things to kind of mitigate the happiness a little bit. Like at a wedding, we break a glass. That doesn't usually lead people to feel sad, but that was the original intent of putting that into the ceremony. Or at a Passover Seder, we take drops of wine out of our cup to remember the Egyptians who drowned in the sea. So in a parallel kind of way, here at a funeral, we recite this prayer that's really life-affirming. We stand, here we are facing the death of a loved one, when we can allow the words of the Mourner's Kaddish to help us move from mourning to an ongoing living memory. So again, for those who are comfortable doing so and who would like to, I'll invite you to rise for Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah Be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael B'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach la'alam u'la'almei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shmei d'kudsha b'richu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shmaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen. May the one who makes peace in the heavens make peace for us, for all Israel, and for all who dwell on earth. And let us say, Amen. May all who mourn find comfort. May all who fall beneath sorrow's burden find the strength to rise and walk on. Let us grant each other peace and give each other courage. Let us spread out a blanket of peace that we might aid in each other's healing. Amen. That brings to a conclusion the formal part of today's ceremony.